All right, GM, everyone. We got a great stream today. Index Card and I are talking with an awesome guest. We got Will Papert here on the show. We're going to cover adventures. We're going to cover infinite games. We're going to talk about Ethereum, much more in this hour to come. So stick around, and we're going to get started right after this. All right, Index Card GM, how are you today?
GM, I'm doing pretty well. I'm actually really excited because I don't know how long ago it was. You brought up the concept of infinite games, and I clung to it quite aggressively. And the individual that I suppose passed it on to you was Will Papert, and we have him here now. So I'm kind of getting infinite games, what I deem straight from the source, even though he didn't write the book. So I'm pretty excited.
Me too, Will, GM, at Will Papert on Twitter.
GM.
You're rocking the Cloud Noun with the green noggles. Is this something you designed, or is this what is this noun?
Yeah, straight from the playground. I love the CC0 culture. My previous PFP was Blitmap, also CC0. Yeah, I was talking with Noun40, and I was like, hey, what do you think about, playground nouns as PFPs? And he's like, CC0 culture, do it. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, I love this design, so I went with it.
Awesome. Does this have a name or a personality, or I noticed you went with the double cloud, so you got the cloud head and the cloud accessory. Is that just any meaning there, or anything to dig into?
It was more of a feeling than anything that would be easier to rationalize. I essentially went in the playground and I did a lot of random generations, and I just slowly narrowed down the things that resonated with me until I landed on this one. So the cloud head was what I narrowed down on first, and then I narrowed down on Noggle type, and then I narrowed down on the shirt color and accessory, and then after that the background. So it's just a process of finding my way through.
Love it. And I got right next door here. Is this noun 123? Yes, 123. This is the noun that you are now acting as a delegate for, right?
Yes, yeah. I was delegated it recently, so yeah, now enough period has passed that I can start making votes, which is exciting.
Awesome. And I think is that the CC0 accessory index? Do you know what the CC accessory is?
Yeah, there's two versions of it. One is kind of like a badge style, and then this one is just like full on, in your face, kind of like varsity shirt, sports team logo type thing. But Noun40 and Noun123, both owned by Noun40, are like two of my favorite nouns from before I ever owned one. So it's kind of like really exciting to see 123 on the stream here. And then also we all kind of start, I think, at the playground at some point. Like I own a noun, but the noun I'm currently rocking as my avatar, it's not necessarily the playground, but it's my own little form of it. So I don't even really rock my own noun.
Yeah. No, I love that remixing culture. That's something that's so unique. Like so many NFT projects, it's like it's a very gatekeeping, scarcity oriented approach. Like, oh, this signals something about the brand and status, and therefore like we rigorously enforce who wears the PFP and which asset they hold for it and things like that. Whereas nouns culture, it's so much more abundance oriented. It's like wear something from the playground, wear a derivative, wear anything that resonates with you. Like Little Panda. I love that. Like you crafted the identity around the panda. It's something where, yeah, that abundance oriented mindset is highly unusual in the NFT space, and one thing that stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into that, talk about adventures. Can I start with kind of a more general question, Will? So you've basically been hired by Noun 40 to delegate and vote. What's relevant about your background that got you here to this point as a Nouns delegate and voter?
Yeah. Yeah, Nouns 14, I became a delegate of Noun 123 because we had very similar outlooks on the space, but very different ideas of how it should be implemented. And that's a really wonderful combination, to have the same end goal, but different opinions on how to achieve it. Creates this really healthy, robust discussion. Uh, Funnily enough, like before he delegated it to me, we had a pretty substantial discussion where I was like, "Oh, this proposal that you advocated for, I actually think like I significantly disagreed with one portion of it, and I think there was like a missed opportunity here." And we had that long discussion about like that essentially became like how do we best make Nouns this gathering place for public good. So very much something where I'm essentially acting on my philosophy. That philosophy aligns with Noun 40's philosophy, but yeah, very very different views of how that should be achieved, and we had healthy debate ourselves about it. So essentially, what brought me into the DAO space? What gave me the perspective that I have now? So I got into the crypto space in 2013. I was working on mesh networking technology one summer at the MIT Media Lab, and found my way from one decentralized technology to another, essentially from mesh networking to Bitcoin, and then was working on small side projects related to Bitcoin in 2013, and then was essentially started to track the Ethereum ecosystem in 2014. I took the $10 sign-up bonus I had from Coinbase and I put that into Ethereum pre-sale. I didn't have much money to invest at the time, and if I'd put $100 in, I could have bought a house with it. But hindsight's 2020. And essentially saw crypto develop these ideals from very early on. So 2014 to 2016 was like this period of just like infinite optimism. Basically, like there were all these like really really highly theoretical, interesting ideas. The one that stood out to me the most was the DAO in 2016, which I put some ETH into. And the DAO in 2016 was this idea of, oh wow, this like ecosystem, the Ethereum ecosystem, is new and emerging, and let's fund it together. Let's see what we can make happen together. And it was an incredibly exciting idea, but of course, the DAO was hacked, and that led to actually another different point in the crypto space, which was forking as a mechanism for agreement or disagreement. Like there was a significant debate in 2016 over whether code is law or whether code is about the intent and code is not law, but the intention is what should be followed. And a fork was created. There was no governance vote. It was just a fork was created. You had Ethereum that rolled back the DAO hack and Ethereum Classic that did not. And people choose which idea they want to affiliate themselves with. And it was Ethereum, so we don't have a code as law approach now, but could have been Ethereum Classic. And if that had achieved most of the sway, then we'd probably have a very different ecosystem. But there was no governance vote. There was no like consensus around which one to choose. It was just people went with the fork that resonated most with them, and that's why we use Ethereum today. So then the second period of crypto, 2017 was an interesting time. It was very speculative. It was not my favorite time. What really was wonderful was the 2018 to 2019 period in crypto as well. I was working at IDEO then. I dropped out of school to do my first company, and I was working at IDEO and then also studying on the side at the same time. And it was this like really experimental time in the space where there were all these different ideas that people are trying out, weird NFT experiments that later became quite prominent. Like CryptoKitties was a thing. There was this like optimism around on-chain gaming, and the 2018 to 2019 time was really interesting because it was all of these ideas that were just standing on their own as interesting ideas, and the whole space was this like gathering place for these weird ideas. And like IDEO, where I was a fellow at the time, was also a gathering place in the bear market for these ideas. So there was just this really wonderful center of gravity that existed around these like strange ideas that, you know, no one really knew how they'd pan out. They didn't really make sense as businesses, but then they turned out to be very successful, and they turned out to make a lot of sense as businesses later on. And that's where I think the thing that's most interesting is that seeing this history of the space develop, like governance tokens and voting with governance to decide things is a very new phenomenon. It really only came to prominence in 2020/2021. Of course, governance tokens existed before then, but they weren't the mainstream view. The mainstream view was forks as a means of dispute resolution. Governance tokens came in like really when the space started to get more professionalized in terms of investment, and like forks started to be viewed as negatives rather than positives. And my view is like there's nothing that says that we should decide these things via consensus. There's like the most of these decisions were decided not by consensus but by very healthy disagreement for quite a while. And yeah, there's a lot of different approaches we can take to deciding these areas of disagreement. And like carving out money for prop house rounds is one way to reconcile things. Of like let's decide what area we should fund, and then let's have more specific evaluation of things in a head-to-head way rather than just viewing proposals in isolation. Or I think there should be even more discretion over grants. Like grants councils should be allowed to be even smaller. We should be able to defer to people's judgment for subsections of the treasury if we agree with their point of view. Like allowing these kinds of like many forks to bloom, this kind of like more autonomous decision making, emphasizing the A in DAOs, is something that that I care deeply about. And that's something that I think like if people came into space in 2021, like all they saw was governance tokens. But it's a rather new phenomenon, and there's many other ways to make decisions in DAOs than just every single governance vote decides everything collectively.
Yeah, there's a lot there to dig into. Index, anything stick out to you that you want to zoom in on?
I mean, I was actually writing down like physical notes here outside of Figma, because he just started going through so many things that like caught my attention that I just like grabbed a pen and started writing. Of course, I come from like a very nouns perspective. I didn't really have too much experience. Like I did trade, buy and acquire ETH and like Bitcoin many years ago. But really it was just nouns that sucked me in. So I don't know if we want to dive too deep into nouns right off the bat. But I have some notes for maybe when we get a little further down the conversation. One of the things that kind of comes to mind with this whole DAO thing is like nouns is currently one of the hot topics is rage quit. And so like I immediately go to the rage quit thought. And then when he talks about, Will talked about consensus and how like a lot of decisions weren't made through consensus. I think of like this new dynamic quorum and how that's kind of affected props. So like I keep viewing everything through a nouns lens, but I don't want to go too deep into nouns right off the bat.
Yeah. Rage quit's interesting. So I'll speak about rage quit more abstractly. I know that rage quit in nouns is a pretty charged topic, and I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I'm the best person to speak to that. But rage quit in general, well, essentially, yeah, if you have consensus decision making, i.e., everyone needs to agree, or a majority needs to agree, then there's this like majority minority balance that's very delicate. And like right now, nouns is probably like 60% public goods and 40%, um, like more oriented towards like the more transactional side of things. That's people might disagree on the exact balance, but like there is that balance, and that balance is very delicate. And like in the age of governance tokens, there's a need to like try to bridge the gap between those two groups. But in the age of forks, that wouldn't have happened. It would have just been, okay, here's these 2 point of views, and you can choose the one that you affiliate with. You can kind of see that, for example, in the L2 space. Like Optimism has a very public goods ethos, and Arbitrum has a very degen ethos, and both are fine. Both are ways to be the world. Both, I think, serve valuable roles in the ecosystem. And like different people have different personal preferences, and they can affiliate with the ecosystem that resonates most with them. And I think that there's something very, very interesting about it, where rage quit is essentially, well, this is where like there's a very big distinction between rage quit and fork. So like rage quit, I mean, comes from Moloch DAO. It comes from the history of, okay, if you disagree with the decision that a treasury is making, you can exit your funds. And rage quit, in many ways, I mean, yes, it's a mechanism for resolving disagreement. Like that is true. But it's also a security mechanism too, which a lot of people miss. Rage quit is a security mechanism because if a DAO has a time lock on their proposals, and proposals, for example, have 3 days or 7 days or whatever between passing and execution, then rage quit gives you an opportunity in that period of time to withdraw your money. So it's also protection against governance capture, because if governance is captured and, for example, 51% of people vote to take money from the other 49%, you can rage quit between the time that proposal is passed and before it's executed. Nouns, of course, takes a different approach to preventing governance capture. They take the approach of having the veto until Nouns governance is sufficiently robust to not need it anymore. But rage quit without a fork, I view as more of a security mechanism. Rage quit with a fork is a way to express a point of view. And I do believe that nouns should be a gathering place for public goods. That's like my core thesis. That's what I intend to express as a delegate. But I also think that people who have, more, I'd say, like degen-oriented views of what nouns should be, they should be free to express those views too. And if people like the whole like rage quit without forks, it's kind of like, okay, then you have this whole like book value arbitrage play, which is probably negative for the community. But if it's rage quit with forks, where you fork to something that more aligns with your beliefs, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. That's how crypto has reconciled its disagreements for most of history until rather recently. So yeah, I think that rage quit, yes, it's a way of expressing disagreement, but it is, without a fork, it's a security mechanism. With a fork, it's a way of expressing disagreement, and I think that oftentimes those points of discussion get lost.
Yeah, and I think that's basically the spec the verbs are working on right now, is sort of the rage quit with fork. But I certainly have not gotten too deep into it. I know it is very, very contentious.
Yeah, I mean, now already had a tweet of like, should we call verb split fork instead? And like, it's interesting because fork, I think fork in my mind has a positive connotation, and it should have a positive connotation. Like, great, let's gather around these ideas we care about, and let's choose people who hold these same views and these same theses, and try to make things happen together. And I think like forks, I don't know, forks, Vampire Attacks gave forks a bad name, but forks should have a positive name. And I really like verbs as this like counterweight for positive forking. The DAO in 2016, it also was forking. It operated where yes votes and no votes, they would fork into two separate DAOs. And over time, you would get a very different range of opinions in the yes camps versus no camps based on what people decide on. Of course, the fork mechanism also was what led it to be vulnerable. So that didn't play out well in practice. But like the idea of forks as gathering places are really, really intriguing. And yeah, I really like what Verbs is doing. It's on my list to dive in far more deeply than I have so far. But yeah, I'm excited to take a close look at what they're working on.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go up to your tweet thread here for a minute and kind of talk a bit more about sort of your core thesis. You kind of gave it away there. You said your core thesis is really nouns as sort of a beacon for public goods on Ethereum, right?
Yes.
So what is a public good? I mean, if we zoom out, just very quick definitions.
Yeah. So public goods don't have as many definitional disputes as, say, DAOs, but you'll still see disagreement. Yeah, you ask different people, you get slightly different things. My own personal view is that public goods are public goods are essentially projects, ideas, movements that benefit an entire ecosystem. So what differentiates something that's a public good from not a public good in my mind is essentially, does it benefit an ecosystem or does it benefit a specific individual or a specific organization? Some people will take it a step further and emphasize the public part of public goods and say it must be like essentially like the equivalent of public infrastructure. It must be free, or it must be subsidized, or it should have like a not profit motivated orientation towards it. I think like in general, the goal of public goods should not be to make a profit, but if they do make a profit and they're sustainable, great. That's a wonderful thing that they can sustain themselves and not need to rely on donations. So yeah, my own personal definition of public goods is projects, movements, ideas that benefit an ecosystem over any specific individuals or groups.
Gotcha. And so is this sort of the core thesis that you led off the show with? You and Noun 40 very much agree with this. You just sort of have different ideas on how to achieve it.
So there's essentially, I'd say that both of us view the role of the Nouns Treasury as supporting public goods, because these public goods should be highly accessible infrastructure. Nouns has a really unique place to fund things that other people won't fund. There's lots of things that benefit the space that might not be, for example, like investable businesses, but should be public goods that anyone can access. Like there should be goods that people aren't excluded from based on holding a token or not holding a token. There should be goods that are positive sum rather than zero sum. Those should exist. Essentially, the disagreement is essentially how much does Nouns push that forward? Like how aggressive should Nouns be about it? So in my mind, Nouns should be very aggressive about promoting itself as this beacon for public goods. Attention spans are very short. Most people are not deep in the intricacies of Nouns governance and Nouns proposals, and people forget very quickly. So Nouns should be reinforcing this. It should be, for example, like if someone's public good is funded, like maybe they should be mandated to, for example, wear a noun from the playground, or like or a noun that someone's delegated them, but maybe it should be encouraged. Maybe it should be like a kind of like a more social expectation. Nouns should more heavily advertise its donations. Like most people don't realize that Nouns has contributed to the Protocol Guild, for example. There's other groups that contribute to it and very, very heavily advertise their donations and use it for PR value, and Nouns doesn't. Most people don't realize this, and I think that's really the question. Is like how much does Nouns seek to promote itself in this light? I think that there's some views that like and I'm not speaking to Noun 40's views here. I'm just speaking more generally. There's some views that like these acts are like best done quietly. Like if people are using it for PR value, that like dilutes, the value of the action itself. It makes it transactional. It makes it like it makes it not its own, not its own, like not being done like for its own sake. And I think that's a fair argument, but at the same time, like that misses the second order effect. The second order effect is that if Nouns promotes itself as a beacon for public goods, it will continue to attract people who want it to be a beacon for public goods. And that 60-40 balance that exists right now might shift to 70-30, 80-20, 90-10. And like Nouns essentially needs to attract like-minded contributors. It needs to be clear about what it stands for. And the only way you do that is by reinforcing the message over and over and over again, until people get it. Like these ideas filter out very slowly. Like I saw in 2021, the idea of DAOs themselves filter out in real time from like a very niche concept in 2016 to like weird experiments in 2019 and 2020 to like very mainstream in 2021. And people just had to repeat the message a lot of times. Public goods and the regen movement are trying to do the same thing now and have that idea filter out. And like Nouns, whatever Nouns thinks is aggressive promotion of public goods or of like the good things that Nouns has done is probably the right level of promotion, because people outside of Nouns have far less visibility and think far less about it. Like they can always check the proposal themselves, but how many of them think to do so? It needs to be reinforced, and that's something that I view as extremely important to attract those kinds of people.
Yeah, and let's go to finite and infinite games, because I think it's almost sort of a sub premise of your approach, but that I think you have a very, very sort of long time horizon on sort of the durability of the Nouns meme. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So yes, I view the Nouns meme as having an infinite time horizon, as an infinite game.
So yeah, talk to us about this concept as though we've never heard it before. There's this book. You told me about this book. What is sort of an infinite game versus a finite game?
Yeah. So essentially, I'll start with finite games. Finite games are games that have rules and they have a desired end state, and they have winners and losers. So like many like sports are, obvious, straightforward examples of finite games. Like you play a game, the game ends, someone wins, someone loses. And the goal of a finite game is to win or lose. It is this direct competition with each other within the boundaries of the rules. The rules act as this like boundary box around what you can do, and within that, you're supposed to compete, and you're supposed to try to take the winning position. And often finite games are also zero sum. Oftentimes you winning means someone else is losing, or there's a finite amount of points to be distributed, or things along those lines. Finite games are these like more traditional competitive games, so to speak. Infinite games are very different. Infinite games, the goal of an infinite game, James Picard says it very well. The goal of an infinite game is essentially to continue to play. The goal is to essentially ensure that this play continues, and as a result, the players will work together and adjust the rules, adjust these boundary box, change it as they go, with the purposes of ensuring that this game continues and does not stop. Like one kind of silly analogy is like finite games in like, if you look at like video games in particular, like PvP games, like you're fighting against each other. There's some winners, there's some losers. Infinite games are more like PvE. You're just trying to continue. You're trying to like thrive in this environment. You're trying to create an ecosystem. You're trying to make sure that it succeeds. So that's where my lens on Nouns is, that it's an infinite game. It's an infinite game where the goal is to continue to play this wonderful game of Nouns and everything it represents. And in particular, what game should it be trying to play? In my opinion, that is creating an ecosystem around itself, an ecosystem of public goods. And those public goods ecosystems are some of the most resilient, infinite game-oriented ecosystems out there. It's something where like many of the early crypto innovations, like Bitcoin and Ethereum were invented as this like infrastructure that anyone could participate in, and view themselves very much as public goods. Maybe the Bitcoin community doesn't necessarily view Bitcoin as a public good; it views it as other things. But like Bitcoin itself is like meant to be this public good of peer-to-peer electronic cash. It's not really used as electronic cash, but it's used as a store of value now. But like that was the original idea, and yeah, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's just this infinite game where we just wanted to keep continuing, and now should be seen in the same light.
Yeah, that certainly speaks to me. Since we're calling this live stream an adventure, well, we've been kind of framing it as sort of, and you kind of came up with this index as sort of as an on-chain RPG game.
Yes. Yes, it kind of is. Like we have these identities that we create, like with pandas and index cards and things that they represent, clouds. We have ways we want this game to continue, and we all evolve it together. Like dynamic quorum is a way where nouns can write the rules as it goes to ensure that it continues. Rage quit, and that proposal is the way to rewrite the rules to ensure that it continues. Yeah, we can keep rewriting these rules as we go, and yeah, people can take on the personas that they want to take on to bring forward their beliefs.
We've kind of been jamming on and off about this of like what games have scoreboards, like arcade games have like a high score list. What do you think kind of the Infinite Games version of Noun's scoreboard analog would look like? Well,
yeah. So that's a great point. One point is that Infinite Games that doesn't mean that they don't have metrics that people strive for. They absolutely can have metrics, and they absolutely can have goals. The goals are just meant to continue the play. Like one example is take inflationary game economics. Like they have a currency in them, they have a form of money, and that money has an inflationary mindset, and people can play this game with the goal of growing, say, an in-game economy without it being a direct competition between each other with winners and losers. Just at some points you have more and at some points you have less, and you can do things to perpetuate like these ecosystems growing. Of course, many scoreboards do become rivalrous. They do become zero sum, but they don't have to. And I think, in my mind, like the noun scoreboard is something where, when that metric is optimized, it shouldn't lead to negative results. Like if it's optimized in even the most adversarial way, it shouldn't have downsides. I'm blanking on the name of the law, but there's like some law when some principle that states like when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. There's a good book, Best and the Brightest, essentially on the Vietnam War and like how body count was used as a measure and how that like corrupted the war effort in many ways. Like there's lots of examples in history where like using these measures as targets like have had negative effects. So whatever nouns chooses to measure itself, it should be something that does not have negative. Good Arts Law, yes, thank you. It should not have negative effects if it's over optimized. Frankly, I don't know what that looks like. I don't think it's necessarily just governance participation. I don't think it's quantity oriented in that way. Quality is hard to measure, hard to score. I don't quite know what that looks like yet. I guess there's some like abstract view where like bringing in values aligned people into nouns is probably the closest I would get. Like if our goal is to make it this gathering place for public goods, this beacon, like, well, then how many people you gather, who you gather, how aligned they are, that should matter. That's hard to quantify on chain. Like a referral system would be a mess. A referral system over optimized would probably turn into a bad measure. It would probably turn into like quantity over quality and not curate based on these views. But yeah, something that represents how much you've contributed to nouns as a gathering place, in my mind, is what's most important. How to quantify that, especially as an on-chain measure, I don't know. But that's my own personal belief.
Yep. Quickly back to sort of the finite and infinite games. One part that I think really resonates with me, at least, is that there can be within nouns, there can be a bunch of different games, and I might interact in one section of the ecosystem, you might interact in another section, we might never cross paths. We can still kind of be playing the same game, even though we don't interact in the same zone, right?
Yeah. I think it's very much something where like these communities, these especially in infinite games, are really healthy when they develop subcultures. Like there should be different derivatives to express different points of views. There should be different, camps in terms of viewpoints and beliefs. That's a sign of a really healthy ecosystem. Like an infinite game, in my mind, is very fragile if there's only one point of view. Like that point of view could easily become like competitive within itself, turn into a finite game, turn into a game of winners and losers. But if there's multiple people competing around the same idea, that strikes me as more fragile than multiple ideas competing. And that's I think what's a really important lens is like it's not really about individual proposals or individual people and what passes or doesn't pass. And I am relatively distant from the like like the like the like governance sausage getting made, so to speak. Like I am intentionally like a step back from that, so it's probably easier for me to say that as someone who plans to contribute to this ecosystem in many ways, but mostly share my thoughts via governance rather than attempting to play a larger role in shaping things. But I think that these ideas, as they're perpetuated, like that, and Nouns does have a battle of ideas. It has a battle between this public goods idea and this more transactional oriented idea. And even within the public goods ideal, it has a disagreement over, okay, is it the nouns meme or is it like what the nouns meme creates? Like, is it just perpetuating nouns in and of itself? Is that a good thing? Or should the perpetuation of nouns be tied to doing good things to the ecosystem, like funding Prop House and funding Agora and funding these initiatives that get off the ground? I think that like the more that this differentiation is around ideas, the healthier things are. The more it's about people, the less healthy things are.
Yeah. What are there any kind of types of proposals that you'd love to see but kind of don't see, or any types of proposals in particular that you would love to vote for if there were more of them? What kind of advice would you give to a builder who maybe shares this view about public goods, wants to do something interesting? What does someone need to do to get your vote?
Yeah. So my heuristic as I think about things is this something that only nouns can do? Like, is this something that no one else will fund? And if so, like it's something that nouns should bring forward. Like public goods, the highest leverage opportunities are to fund the things that other people won't fund. You can fund public goods that everyone else is funding, sure, but like that's not making the largest impact. In my mind, the largest impact is funding things that other people aren't funding. So my lens on it is if there's alternative funding sources, nouns might not be the best fit. If this is a product that you can sell and you can go set up a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or like on-chain crowdfunding campaign, then like is nouns playing a unique role in kicking this off? No. If it's not, then this is probably not the best way to carry forward the infinite game when there's other mechanisms that can carry it forward. Likewise, if something is VC fundable, nouns shouldn't refrain from funding it by any means, but it should probably be held to a higher standard. Is this something that nouns is uniquely able to perpetuate? Like, sure, there's many VC fundable businesses that can benefit nouns, but is nouns the one that is uniquely able to kick this off? That's in my mind. Like, if the goal is to expand this public goods ecosystem, let's expand it by making sure that things happen that wouldn't happen otherwise. If there's other ways that can happen, they should go and do that. So as I vote on proposals, I will probably be voting no a lot, because my lens will be: is nouns the unique funding source for this? Is this nouns, by spending money, is choosing to spend money on by spending money on one thing, of course, it's sacrificing some other opportunity. There is some reduction in optionality. I don't think that should be a reason not to spend money, but I do think it should be a reason to spend money carefully. It should be a reason to spend money carefully where that money has the highest impact, and it has the highest impact in funding things that other people won't fund.
All right, this is where I kind of come in and make a callback to something you said in the very beginning. You were having a conversation with Noun 40 about a specific proposal, and I was kind of hoping maybe you remember that proposal that you had a disagreement with Noun 40 over, and so this could be like potentially a tangible, like real example of your viewpoint.
Yeah. So our disagreement was more on essentially how much nouns should promote itself as a beacon for public goods. So it wasn't a particular proposal that we thought shouldn't be funded, but essentially how much it should promote itself in the process of funding it. So I don't feel comfortable representing his views because it wasn't one-on-one conversation, but I feel comfortable representing my views. And my view, I talked to him about the Zach XBT proposal, and I said to him, it's very surprising to me that if we're giving 100 ETH to someone as a donation, that we don't, expect anything in return. And I'm not saying that we should expect something concrete in return. I'm not saying that this should be a transaction, but if we're giving 100 ETH to someone, we should make sure that people know about it, and that people know that nouns is the place for public goods. It's from my perspective, the Zach XBT proposal was talked about for 3 days. Nouns did such a good thing. Nouns funded Zach with 100 ETH. Nouns did do a very good thing. They funded work that would not have been funded otherwise. They helped perpetuate this infinite game by also cleaning up the space in general. It's something that makes people more likely to join and makes it and gives it a better reputation. Funding Zach XBT is unequivocally a public good, but how much should nouns advertise themselves? The proposal didn't have any particular mandates, and the money was basically sent, and then that was that. And if you ask people on Twitter, or if you ask people at random who are deep in the NFT ecosystem, what public goods has nouns funded, I don't know if they were to remember the Zach XBT funding, just like how many people don't remember the Protocol Guild funding. But in my mind, maybe there shouldn't be a mandate, but there should be an expectation that people are reminded of this nouns funding on an ongoing basis. Maybe that's Zach XBT putting Noggles in his name. Maybe that's wearing a noun from the playground. Maybe that's he's gifted a noun from the treasury as well, and he can wear that noun proudly. I don't have preferences on how that is perpetuated, but if people see Zach XBT's work constantly, but they only remember that nouns funded him for a 3-day period and then they forget, there's a missed opportunity there to remind people about that funding. How it's done so, how aggressive that should be, that's still very new and very emerging. So I wouldn't say that, I would say there will need to be experimentation on the methods, how much this is required versus socially suggested versus just a norm. But the reality is that probably most people have forgotten the Zach XBT funding, and we should remind people of that so that they know what noun stands for.
And then I guess Panda here is pulling up a more recent proposal that went live just today, I think. And so
yeah, and I'd love to you probably haven't even seen this yet. I just pulled this one up, Will, but could you give us a quick crash course on your process when you are looking at a proposal to vote? Like this one, sort of a public goods, donating to matching funds to a Gitcoin advocacy round. How does Will Papper look at this when he decides how to vote? What's your process?
Yeah, so I saw a mention of this proposal on Twitter. I've read the proposal, so it's great that we can read it in real time and give a sense of my thinking. So yeah, first the general premise, like mint 5K stand with crypto NFTs and donate 100K to Gitcoin's crypto advocacy round. That seems excellent. That is something that Nouns is uniquely able to fund. Will other people mint those NFTs and make those donations? Yeah, probably. But is Nouns able to do so in a way that's unique? 100%. There's no groups have a mandate to make donations. They'll make donations because they decide to do so, and this is an area where Nouns can uniquely fund a typically underfunded public good, especially from a neutral ground. There's lots of great crypto advocacy. Some of it is not from neutral ground. That's perfectly okay. I think it's great that companies and funds advocate for their interests. I love that they do so, and it benefits the whole ecosystem. It's also good to have some actors in the space that aren't advocating for a particular set of interests that they themselves represent. And Nouns, as a DAO that uses on-chain governance, there is like with the Uki DAO case that basically said that on-chain governance voters have liability for the DAO's actions, or could have liability for the DAO's actions. That it's good that Nouns is advocating for something that will help people feel more encouraged to participate in governance too, if there's more regulatory clarity. So overall, like, does this proposal uniquely enable funding something that wouldn't get funded otherwise, and is Nouns the best place to do it? I think the answer is absolutely yes. So now my lens is kind of like, okay, well, how much is Nouns going to remind people about this? Like how much will Nouns like get advocacy for this? So like, one, Nouns is trying to claim the top spot on the leaderboard. Cool. That's a good example, and that's also a nice example. We're just talking about how infinite games can have scoreboards or leaderboards and like not be zero sum. Nouns claiming the top spot on the leaderboard for their donations is a great example of it. Nouns donating money to the Gitcoin crypto advocacy round is excellent as well. But also another thought on my mind is essentially like, will people remember this after it happens? If Nouns makes this donation, will people remember it? And I don't know. The answer is maybe, but what I would love to see, for example, is maybe not even a requirement that the beneficiaries of the money perpetuate the Nouns meme, but maybe a suggestion that they do so. If you click through the Gitcoin round, you can see it's Coin Center, Blockchain Foundation, DeFi Education Fund, Fight for the Future, and Blockchain Association that are the ones going to get funded by the Gitcoin grants round. It'd be great to not even require those groups to like support Nouns or perpetuate Nouns in some ways, but maybe suggest it like, oh, if the groups have benefited from this, maybe we suggest that they put Noggles in their name, or maybe we suggest that they tweet about it, and they don't have to. It's not going to be a condition of the receipt of the funds, but maybe we encourage it, because by contributing 100K to this matching round, and being as far as I can tell, 50% of the matching funds available, where that would be very valuable. And you can see even like Coinbase, for example, which I assume contributed the other 100K in matching funds, has their name right on the Gitcoin page. Coinbase is on a mission to advocate for digital asset policies here in the United States, and this crypto advocacy round will support the amazing organizations who are leading the charge. If Nouns is putting up an equal amount of money, another 100K, they should be there too, and they should advocate for themselves. It's a little hard because you can't necessarily require any of this, but I don't think you need to. I think you can just show that by being good actors in space, Nouns expects other people to recognize that and help make sure that behavior is rewarded. So if Nouns, this proposal is a great example of something that Nouns is uniquely able to do. But if Nouns advocated more strongly for itself by suggesting they're in the Gitcoin description, getting that confirmation, for example, that Coinbase or Gitcoin would add it, by making some light suggestions to the groups that are receiving this money, I think that would be a wonderful thing. And I think that people will probably remember this proposal for 3 days and then forget about it. And I think that we can do more to remind them of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about something that I've been, where my mind is going to something I've been thinking about a lot is that there's like almost this kind of like purity stance in nouns. Um, and like there's a few proposals up now that I think may force nouns to cross that threshold, maybe in an area that you're not as interested in or you don't think nouns should pursue. So maybe not go too deep on that. But like nouns has this whole proliferate the meme concept. And it's very, very aggressive in certain areas. But after listening to you speak, it's kind of becoming very clear that like it's on one complete opposite end of the spectrum in like the media area and like the meme area, and then on the public goods, it's kind of like not really there at all. It's like this weird like dynamic
right
between the two ends of the spectrum.
I think there's almost this belief that like by advocating for some sort of promotional value from this, that it ruins the purity of it. And I mean, like, sure, that's true. I don't deny it. Like, giving money with no strings attached, no expectations is sure, like a little more pure than giving money like with some expectations or strings attached. Fine, I get that. I understand that. But that's just the first order effects. The second order effects are if nouns makes it clear that they put together a bunch of matching funds, maybe more people will join the matching funds. Like perpetuating the nouns meme in the Gitcoin context is not just good for nouns, it's good for Gitcoin. It's good for matching funds ecosystems as a whole. If nouns talks about how they minted this NFT, maybe more people will then start minting the NFT. Maybe if nouns more aggressively promotes itself, like there'll be even more donations. So like on a first order stance, like yeah, sure, it is somewhat more pure to give money. Like it is the most pure in my mind to give money anonymously, and the second most pure to give money with like zero expectations or strings attached. And after that is kind of like these light expectations or light strings attached. Sure, but like if nouns promotes itself more aggressively, it can get more donations to going to these crypto advocacy groups. That's a great thing. That should happen. And like we shouldn't hesitate to do that. We're promoting a good thing. We're trying to market something and push something forward that benefits everyone. So we shouldn't hesitate on that. We shouldn't hold back on that. We should be aggressive about that. And it's okay to do so. It's being aggressive for good reasons.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought much about this at all. Index, have you even been sort of aware of this dimension?
Not really, because I think like I'm more drawn to like the or I've naturally been drawn to like the other side of the spectrum, and so like I appreciate this conversation because it's kind of like opening up my eyes to this other side but I think it's kind of like the proposers who are willing to propose something public good oriented will naturally not want to promote it very much, and I think it's kind of like this inherent bias in the proposers that are drawn to this type of proposal and like thought. I don't know how it changes or how it fixes. Maybe someone like Will coming into the equation with his delegacy or delegation will kind of like shape the culture a little bit more. But yeah, this is like the first time I'm thinking about this deeply from this angle.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be just one voice with one vote, but I hope to bring that forward more. It's something I've seen this time and time again. Like these ideas that are prominent in crypto are only prominent because people are willing to repeat them over and over and over again and remind people of them. And nouns should do the same. Nouns shouldn't hesitate there. It takes a lot more than people think to get people to remember this.
Yeah. I mean, do you think anyone else will delegate to you, or are you kind of just planning on voting with one delegation?
I mean, I intend to express my views, and I intend to not hesitate on them, and I also intend to stay at an arm's length, so I'm not too attached to like specific people or specific ideas, but instead to more perpetuate this thesis in a hopefully unbiased, balanced way. So if people agree with that, they're welcome to delegate more. I right now I haven't. I'm the 1 week period from the delegation just ended, so I haven't. I'm just going to be starting to make votes. So I'd recommend they wait and see if they like my decisions. But I'm not. I'm not. Simply being able to express my views with reason is enough for me. If people want to delegate more of those views, great. But I'm not trying to sway these votes. I'm not trying to be a governance whale. I'm just trying to help people dive more deeply into this. What are the second order implications? How do we become this gathering place? How do we become this beacon for public goods? It's not really my voting power that will make the biggest difference. It's probably just repeating this idea over and over again and perpetuating this thesis. So by pushing forward this thesis that Noun should be a beacon and this like gathering place for public goods, I think I hope to slowly shift views that way. And if that succeeds, then I don't think I need more delegation. I think that these proposals will naturally shape themselves around it. I don't intend to sway via votes. I intend to sway via the reasons.
Excellent. Well, you are on Twitter. It's probably the best place to follow you, at Will Papper. Anywhere else anyone should follow you, Will?
Yeah, mostly Twitter at Will Papper. And I'm also at Will Papper on like Telegram too. But yeah, Twitter DMs is the fastest way to reach me. Of course, also work on Syndicate for most of my time. That's where I spend the vast majority of my time, focused on investment DAOs and other types of on-chain communities. So I'm always happy to jam on that. I also have been coding Solidity for over 2 years now, almost 2.5 years. So people want to chat about Solidity, always happy to do that. Via me as someone to reach out to for thoughts on this thesis, for technical advice. I'm happy to contribute. I'll be contributing at an arm's length, both just limitations of my time available and also because I think that'll be the best way for me to govern in a more impartial, distant way. Always happy to dive in with people.
Awesome. With that, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on. We're going to look forward to your votes. Sorry, actually, one last question is, what do you have an ENS for the address you'll be voting from, or how are we going to know how you're voting?
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna set up all of the ENS infrastructure for the first vote, but I own both Papper.eth and willpapper.eth. Willpapper.eth matches my Twitter, so I have a hot wallet set up for voting, so I intend to just point willpapper.eth at it, and then use papper.eth for like sending funds and things like that. From a Noun's perspective, the ENS people will be able to look at is just my Twitter username. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to watch that closely. We really want to thank you again for coming on.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed the chat, and I would say don't downplay your role, even though you want to stay at an arm's length. Like, governance is the engine to this whole thing. So just by voting, that's somewhat of a large role. And then of course, if you ever had a proposal in mind, I have another Noun. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Definitely. Always happy to dive in.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back at our regular show next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be doing some side quests along the way this week as we work our way on chain. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks so much.